Okay, quick question before we start today. Have you ever been on a phone call with a native English speaker and somewhere in the middle of the sentence, the words just disappeared? Like they melted together into one long sound, and your brain just gave up trying to separate them?
I know exactly what you mean. And it's not because your English is bad. It's because native speakers don't say words the way textbooks teach you. They squeeze them together. They drop sounds. They connect one word straight into the next one.
Today, we're going to talk about that. Why English sounds so fast and so blurry when it's spoken naturally, and how you can train your ear and your mouth to catch it and even use it yourself. Welcome back to Rose and Jack Everyday English. We're so happy you're here. I hope yesterday's episode helped you a little bit. Today is day 29 of our 30-day B1 to B2 challenge, and we are so close to the end now. Today's topic is how to sound more natural with connected speech. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why native speakers sound so fast, and you'll feel a lot more confident listening to real English conversation, not just textbook English.
And honestly, this is one of my favorite topics because I remember the exact moment I understood what connected speech even was. It changed how I listen to English completely. Okay, so let me start because I have a story that still makes me a little embarrassed even now. A few years ago, I got a part-time job answering phones for a small travel company. My job was simple. Customers would call and I would help them change their flight dates or check their booking details. I had studied English for years at that point. I could read complicated articles, I could write long emails. I thought my English was actually pretty solid.
I remember you telling me about this job, but I don't think I ever heard the full story.
Well, my first week was a disaster, not because I didn't know the vocabulary, but because I could not understand what people were saying on the phone. In person or in a video call, you can read lips a little, you can see facial expressions, you get extra clues. But on the phone, you only have sound. And that's when I discovered something nobody had ever explained to me properly. Native English speakers don't pronounce words one by one the way we learn them in school. They connect them.
Can you give an example? Because I think a lot of our listeners feel exactly what you're describing.
Sure. So one of my first calls, a woman said something that sounded like, "Want to change your flight for tomorrow?" And I panicked because I thought she was asking me if I wanted to change my flight. But actually, she was saying, "Do you want to change your flight for tomorrow?" She just connected want to into wanna and dropped the do you almost completely. Because in fast, natural speech, those small grammar words get very quiet.
Ah, that's such a good example because wanna isn't even a real word, but everyone uses it in speaking.
Exactly. And it wasn't just wanna, it was things like gonna instead of going to, gotta instead of have got to, kinda instead of kind of. At first, I genuinely thought these were separate words I had never learned. I actually looked up gonna in a dictionary once during a break because I thought maybe it was some British slang word I had missed.
That's so relatable, honestly. I did something similar, but with a completely different kind of situation. When I moved to be closer to my English speaking cousins for a summer, I used to watch movies with them almost every night. And I remember one specific movie, a comedy, where two characters were arguing in a kitchen, and one of them said something that sounded like, "What are you doing?" I sat there completely lost because I could not connect that sound to any sentence I knew.
And it was just, what are you doing?
Exactly. What are you became what ya. All four words squeezed together into practically one sound. My cousins didn't even notice they were doing it because for them, it's completely automatic. But for me, it felt like they were speaking a different language inside English.
That's the strange thing about connected speech, isn't it? Native speakers don't even realize they're doing it because nobody ever teaches them the rule. They just grow up hearing it and copying it.
Right. And I think that's exactly the problem for learners like us. We study English from books and apps where every word is separated and clear. Do you want to go? Each word perfectly pronounced. But real conversation almost never sounds like that. It sounds like, do you want to go?
So let's go back to my phone job story for a second, because there's more. After that first difficult call with a wanna change your flight moment, I started paying much closer attention. I began writing down in a small notebook next to my computer every phrase I didn't understand the first time. And after about 2 weeks, I noticed something. It wasn't hundreds of different problems. It was really just a handful of patterns repeating again and again.
What kind of patterns?
Okay, so the first big one was linking consonant sounds to vowel sounds. For example, if someone says an hour, it doesn't sound like two separate words, an hour. It sounds more like an hour because the end sound connects directly to the hour sound. Or turn it off becomes something closer to turn it off because the final consonant jumps onto the next word.
I actually noticed this exact thing when I was ordering coffee once, back when my English wasn't as strong. The barista asked me, "What kind of milk do you want in it?" But it came out sounding like, "What kind of milk do you want to knit?" I stood there for maybe 3 full seconds just blinking at her.
3 seconds is a long time when someone is waiting for your answer.
It felt like an hour. But she wasn't speaking unusually fast for a native speaker. That was just normal, everyday speed for her. It was normal for her ears, but for my ears, it was like trying to catch water with your hands.
That's such a good way to describe it. And that leads to the second pattern I noticed at my job, which was sounds disappearing completely, not just connecting, but actually vanishing. Like the word next time. Native speakers often don't fully pronounce that final T sound. It becomes something closer to next time. Or friends becomes almost friends because the middle sounds get softened.
And I think a lot of learners feel discouraged when they notice this because it feels like the rules they learned don't even apply anymore.
I felt exactly that at first. I felt like all those years of studying grammar and vocabulary were suddenly useless because understanding spoken English felt like a completely separate skill.
It really is a separate skill in a way. Reading and speaking use different parts of your brain almost. You can have a huge vocabulary and still struggle to understand fast, connected speech because your ears simply hasn't been trained for it yet.
So here's what changed everything for me, and I think this is the part our listeners will actually find useful. Around the third week of that job, my manager, a very patient woman named Diane, sat next to me during a call, and afterwards she said something I still remember. She said, "You're listening for perfect words. Stop listening for words and start listening for rhythm."
That's such interesting advice. What did she mean exactly?
She meant that English has a rhythm, almost like music, where some words are stressed and loud and other words are quiet and fast. The important words like nouns and main verbs get stressed, but the small connecting words like to, the, of, you, those get squeezed and quiet. So instead of trying to hear every single word clearly, she told me to focus on catching the stressed important words and let my brain fill in the small connecting words naturally.
That's genuinely brilliant advice because it takes the pressure off. You don't have to understand every syllable perfectly.
Exactly. Once I started listening for the rhythm instead of individual words, everything became easier almost immediately. When someone said, "I'm gonna call you back in a minute," I stopped trying to hear each tiny word, and instead I focused on the strong words, call, back, minute, and my brain naturally understood the whole sentence even with all the connected, reduced sounds around them.
That reminds me of something from my own experience, actually. When I lived with my cousins that summer, I started doing something without even planning it. I began repeating lines from the movies we watched out loud by myself in my room, trying to copy the rhythm, not just the words.
Did that actually help?
It helped enormously because when you physically practice saying, "What are you doing?" or "I don't know," or "Let me think," your mouth learns the natural connected sound. And once your mouth can produce that sound, your ear suddenly recognizes it instantly when someone else says it. It's almost like your mouth teaches your ear.
That's such a good point because I did something similar without realizing it was the same idea. After a few months at that job, I started imitating my coworkers, not the vocabulary they used, but literally the melody and speed of their sentences. And customers started commenting that I sounded much more natural on the phone, more relaxed, less like I was reading from a script.
I think that's the real goal here, isn't it? Not to memorize a list of reduced forms like gonna and wanna, although that helps a little, but to actually train your ear and your mouth together through real listening and real speaking practice.
Right. And I want to be honest about something too, because I made a mistake early on that I think a lot of learners make. When I first learned about gonna and wanna, I started using them everywhere, even in formal emails, because I thought using casual language automatically meant sounding more natural.
Oh, that's an easy trap to fall into.
It really is. My manager gently corrected me once because I had written gonna in an email reply to a customer. And she explained that connected speech forms like gonna and wanna belong in spoken, casual conversation, not in writing, and definitely not in professional writing. So the lesson wasn't just learning the reduced forms, it was learning exactly when they're appropriate to use.
That's such an important distinction. I think a lot of learners hear native speakers using these reduced forms constantly in speech, and they assume the same applies to writing. But written English, especially formal writing, usually stays closer to the full forms: want to, going to, have got to.
Exactly. So here's what I'd say to anyone listening who feels frustrated by connected speech. First, don't blame your vocabulary or your grammar knowledge, because this is a completely different skill related to sound and rhythm, not word knowledge. Second, start noticing the patterns. Things like sounds connecting between words, final sounds softening or disappearing, and small grammar words becoming quiet and fast. And third, practice out loud, not just listening, because speaking the reduced connected forms yourself trains your ear far faster than passive listening alone.
I completely agree with all of that. And I'd add one more thing from my own experience. Don't feel embarrassed when you don't understand something the first time. I stood there confused about milk in my coffee. You panicked about a flight change on the phone. These moments feel uncomfortable in the moment, but they're actually the exact moments where real learning happens.
That's true. I actually became good friends with that customer, the one with the flight change call. She called back a few weeks later for something else, recognized my voice, and we ended up talking for almost 10 minutes about her upcoming trip. If I hadn't pushed through that confusing, embarrassing first call, I never would have reached that comfortable, natural conversation later.
I love that story, honestly. It shows exactly how this process works. Confusion first, noticing patterns second, practice third, and finally, real natural conversation. That's basically the whole journey of understanding connected speech in one story.
And I think our listeners are probably somewhere in that journey right now. Maybe still in the confused stage, maybe already starting to notice the patterns. Wherever you are, that's completely normal. And it's exactly where Rose and I were too, not that long ago. Okay, so now let's actually show everyone what we mean instead of just talking about it. Rose, let's do a quick practical conversation, the kind you might have on the phone. And I'll speak the way people really speak with all the connected sounds, and then we'll slow it down so everyone can hear the difference clearly.
Perfect. Let's do it. I'll play the customer calling about a hotel booking, and you can play the person answering.
All right. Hey, so I'm calling about my booking. I think I'm gonna need to change the date. Is that something you guys can help me with?
Yeah, of course. What do you want to change it to? Just let me pull up your details real quick.
I think I'm gonna push it back a week if that's possible. My flight kinda got moved around too, so it just made sense to shift everything together.
No problem at all. That's pretty common. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to check what's available, and then I'll let you know what your options are.
Great, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Now let's slow that down and show exactly what happened, because so much was hiding inside those sentences. When I said, "What do you want to change it to?" that was actually 5 separate words squeezed together. What do you want to? But spoken naturally, it just flows as one connected sound.
And when I said I'm gonna need to change the date, that gonna is really going to. And nobody pauses between those two words in real conversation. It becomes one smooth sound, almost like a single word.
This is exactly the kind of thing that confuses learners the first 100 times they hear it. But once you notice the pattern, your brain starts catching it automatically, almost without effort.
So here's a challenge for you, listening right now. Try saying our whole conversation out loud, copying exactly how we said it. The connected, relaxed way, not the slow, separated textbook way. Your mouth needs to practice this rhythm just as much as your ears need to hear it.
And if it feels strange or even a little embarrassing at first, that's completely normal. I remember feeling silly the first time I tried saying gonna and wanna out loud on purpose because it felt too casual, almost incorrect somehow. But that feeling fades really quickly once you realize this is just how real, everyday English conversation actually sounds.
Exactly. And that discomfort is honestly a really good sign. It usually means you're stepping outside the textbook version of English and moving toward real, natural spoken English, which is exactly the goal of this whole challenge.
All right, let's slow down now and properly review some of the expressions that came up naturally in today's conversation, because there were quite a few useful ones.
Let's start with gonna, which comes from going to. It's used for future plans or intentions, like, I'm gonna call you later. A common mistake is writing gonna in emails or formal messages, when really it belongs only in casual speech.
Next is wanna, from want to, used for desires or requests, like, do you want to grab lunch? Learners sometimes avoid using it completely because they think it sounds incorrect, but in relaxed spoken English, it's actually the more natural choice compared to always saying want to.
Then there's gotta from have got to, meaning something is necessary, like, I gotta finish this today. A common mistake is forgetting that gotta already includes the meaning of obligation, so people sometimes add extra words and say something like, I gotta must finish, which isn't correct.
We also used lemme from let me, which is used when offering to do something or asking for a moment, like, let me check that for you. And very similarly, gimme from give me, used when asking someone to hand you something or provide information, like, give me a second.
Another important one was kinda from kind of, which softens a statement like, I kinda forgot about the meeting. Learners sometimes overuse this and put it in every sentence, which can make speech sound unsure. It works best occasionally, not constantly.
We also had whata ya, which comes from what do you, used mainly in questions like, what do you think about this? This one takes practice because so many sounds combine together, but with repetition, it becomes easy to both recognize and use naturally.
And finally, could ya and would ya from could you and would you, used for polite requests like, could ya send me that file? These are extremely common in fast, friendly conversation, especially between people who know each other well.
A more natural alternative, if you're speaking to someone more formally, like in a job interview or with a stranger, would be to use the fuller forms, could you and would you, clearly pronounced, rather than the connected, casual versions.
Let's talk about a few common mistakes learners make with connected speech and natural pronunciation.
The first mistake is treating gonna, wanna, and gotta as separate vocabulary words to memorize, rather than natural sound patterns. Incorrect thinking sounds like, I need to learn the word gonna. Correct thinking is, gonna is just how going to sounds when it's spoken quickly and naturally.
The second mistake is using these reduced forms in formal writing. Incorrect, I'm gonna send the report tomorrow, written in a professional email. Correct, I'm going to send the report tomorrow, using the full form in writing while saving gonna for casual conversation only.
The third mistake is trying to pronounce every single word separately and clearly when speaking quickly, which actually makes learners sound less natural, not more correct. Incorrect saying, what do you want to do, with 4 fully separated words. Correct allowing it to naturally flow as, what do you want to do, the way a native speaker would say it in relaxed conversation.
And the fourth common mistake is feeling embarrassed or avoiding connected speech completely because it feels too casual or somehow incorrect. But avoiding it actually makes your English sound less stiff and less like real, everyday English conversation, which is exactly what this whole podcast is trying to help you achieve.
Now it's your turn. We want you to try something specific today. Think of one sentence you often say, maybe something like, I'm going to call you later, or do you want to eat something?
Now write that sentence twice in the comments below. First, write it in the full textbook form. Then, write it again the way it would actually sound in fast-connected natural speech, using things like gonna, wanna, or lemme.
This is such a great exercise for English listening practice and English speaking practice together because it forces you to actually notice the difference between written English and spoken English, which is exactly what today's episode was all about.
We really do read every single comment, and we love seeing how you're all applying these ideas in your own way. So please don't be shy. Jump in and give it a try.
Thank you so much, friends, for spending this time with us today. We know connected speech can feel a little confusing at first, maybe even a bit strange, but you handled it really well, and that says a lot about how far you've come in this challenge.
We're so proud of your consistency. Day 29 means you're almost at the finish line of this 30-day B1 to B2 challenge, and that's genuinely a huge achievement. Learning English speaking, especially natural, everyday English conversation, takes real patience, and you're clearly putting in that effort every single day.
Don't miss tomorrow's episode, Day 30, the final day of our challenge, where we're going to bring everything together in a really special way.
If you haven't already, please subscribe so you don't miss it. And if today's episode helped you understand real English conversation a little better, give it a like and share it with a friend who's also learning English.
Thank you again for listening, for practicing, and for trusting us on this journey. See you tomorrow, friends, for our final day together.